We've reached a critical moment for Georgia, Kirby, the Dogs, as this 2024 season gets here. You got your first rivalry game of the season. I was talking to one insider, Matt DeBerry, on the Monday or Sunday. The days blur together, and he said, "I'm really glad Georgia's playing Auburn this week because Kirby's going to have their full attention."
Yeah, I mean, what a rivalry, right? One of the best really in college football, especially if you're in the South. This used to be the sweater weather game, in late November, everything on the line. Just doesn't have that type of feel. Georgia's won 7 in a row in a rivalry that used to go back and forth, back and forth. They're taking off at the series lead. Just doesn't have that same feel, Dean, as it did maybe in the 90s and early 2000s and maybe after that. And they've had some big moments with the Nick Fairleys and the Cam Newtons and that type of era. But Auburn's coming to Athens, a place they haven't won since 2005. But it doesn't matter, right? This is a big rivalry, like everyone around the program is talking about. It's still Auburn, and no matter if they're really good or really bad, that's a team that it's an important game to everyone in the program, the entire fan base. I mean, it is a different type of rivalry, and it's a little weird that it's still being played, kind of early in, I guess, almost midway through the season. But this is an important one and one that Georgia fans really care about. We'll see if Georgia steps it up and, really thumps them in Athens this weekend, because I know a lot of fans, Ryan, would love to see that. And they always love seeing Georgia beat Auburn.
Yeah, just go online, go to SeatGeek or whatever app you use, and look at the ticket prices for all of Georgia's games this season. And you're going to see, obviously, Tennessee is ridiculously priced because it's a top 5 matchup, but you're going to see that Auburn's not that much cheaper. It's a game that matters, even though Auburn's not a good football team, and they haven't been for, since 2017 at this point? Was that the last time they had a real good year? It matters a lot. It matters to Kirby a lot. These players will tell you, a lot of these players grew up in Vegas or California or Texas or whatever. They didn't grow up caring about these Georgia rivalries as much as Kirby did. But you hear the out-of-state kids in these press conferences talk about these rivalries and how important they are. I remember Jamon Demis Johnson last year. He's from Virginia, right? He was talking about how much Kirby just instills in them that these games are important for the university. I think that you see it on Kirby's face, especially in Jacksonville after the game. But you see it. You see when Georgia wins close against Auburn last year. It matters a lot. I think Georgia's going to show up on Saturday in a big way.
It is the. It is the. Well, it'll be the most important home game until Tennessee. Obviously, there's not a lot in the way there, but this is one of those games that you make memories and people will remember it the rest of your life. I mean, no one's going to write about the game that Georgia plays against Mississippi State ever. And the difference between Georgia Auburn and Georgia Bama is Georgia Auburn play each other every single year, and that's what makes it such a special thing. This season, I don't know if we've entered must-win territory, but I mean, I gotta say, if you don't beat Auburn, you're just not good. So there's that. But this was such a huge game as a child. Kirby was talking about it last night about how all he did was watch, college football, and I mean that's all we did too. I mean there wasn't a lot of distractions, and the games. I'm not sure if they felt monumentally bigger, Matt, back then. The difference now is the shift in the calendar because the game is not the last SEC game of the season. It almost always was. So the SEC championship or the SEC East came down to this game for Georgia and for Auburn many times too for the West. But I'm not sure. I don't know if it takes that part away or not. There's just so much crossover in terms of family and so forth. But I think for Auburn, they have been walking in the wilderness for a while now. And Alabama being better than Auburn is one thing, but Alabama being a complete national power and then Georgia doing the same exact thing, that's really problematic for Auburn, and it's hurting them.
Yeah. They're a basketball school right now, trying to keep up with football, and it's really tough when you have your two biggest rivals as two of the nation's top powerhouses. But yeah, I mean, there have been just so many big moments. If you talk about the 0-2 game that really turned that era of Georgia football into something that was pretty special. They didn't win a national title in those years, but that play, David Green to Michael Johnson, was one of the best in program history. You had the blackout. You had a lot of really, really big moments, and I'm not sure we're going to see one this weekend. I think Georgia will win comfortably. But the mesh of colors is great. These two programs recruit against each other, and every year, and have been for some big time players. Just a different feel. Fall is really in the air at this point, and you can feel when Georgia-Auburn's coming around. Just a little earlier this year, but I don't think they've got the quarterback this year. I'm not sure Hugh Freeze is the guy. I think a lot of Auburn fans are still optimistic, but it is a weird, part of, their program where they're at. But they've kind of been mediocre to below average for a minute now. They've got to figure that out while Georgia stays. I don't think Georgia's going anywhere. But, again, this game matters a lot, and Georgia needs to show that they are still one of the best programs and teams in the country, and I think they'll do that on Saturday.
Yeah, it's been, I think, since 2016 since this was a fight in Athens. Otherwise, all of the fights have been, or Georgia losses have been in Jordan-Hare Stadium. This is a game that I grew up going to a lot. So I every year that Auburn was around, that we would go to that game. But it is different. These last few years, college football has changed a lot, and one of the little changes that's happened to that obviously is this game being an October game. I guess Tennessee and Auburn essentially flipping a little bit in terms of which one's in October and which one's in November. It takes a little bit of the nostalgia out of that. These games they'd be at 3:30 or night, and it'd be cold, and a game that you'd bundle up for. So there's definitely a different atmosphere, but I don't think it changes in terms of the importance. This game specifically, though, I mean, like it has been for the last few years, they're just not in the same position as a program right now. And Auburn's on another coach that there's a lot of unrest and there's a lot of distractions. And is this going to work again, right? And that was the case 2 years ago when they came to Athens with Brian Harsin. I remember it was actually around the time of the Georgia game where I think there was a lot of Harsin drama going on, if I remember correctly. So kind of playing that fiddle again here with a new guy. Just have a hard time seeing this be a close game in Athens with a Georgia team that's hurt, pissed off, a little damage from what happened the other day, but ultimately they've learned a lot about themselves, and I think that the coaching staff is probably going to do a pretty good job of steering them in the right direction after what happened.
So, comparatively speaking, Auburn and Georgia there's not a lot in common. One is the flagship of their state. The other one is Auburn. One has been happy with its coaches for probably a half a century, and the other has had Pat Dye, and I mean, Auburn tried to run Tommy Tuberville out of there before he went undefeated. That was a bad look. Then they did run him out. Then they brought in Gene Chizik and won a national championship with Cam Newton. That was amazing. And then they ran Gene Chizik out of there, I think 2 years later or a year later. It was 2 years later. Then they had Gus Malzahn, who was the will he, won't he stay or go to Arkansas thing for coming on like half a decade. And they finally ran him out of there. Then they brought in Brian Harsin. The athletic director made a huge error there. And then they ran out the athletic director. And now they brought in Hugh Freeze, who they desperately wanted. And I see people all the time comparing Hugh Freeze to Auburn's basketball coach, Bruce Pearl. Bro, it ain't even close to the same thing. Bruce Pearl is exceptionally good at his job. The notion that Bruce Pearl is on the same moral standing as Hugh Freeze, do not start with me. So Auburn, though, Matt, you can't have Auburn without chaos. That is their brand. That's what they're exceptional at it. Auburn's really good at that. Bama's really good at that too when they have chaos. But they don't. These two, they don't have chaos right now. Alabama, and haven't for a while. Auburn is the chaos team. They love it.
Yeah, I think Hugh Freeze is basically just a Kroger brand Bobby Petrino at this point. That's just what you get from him. He's not as good as Brian Petrino, I think, as a coach, but there is that chaos and there is that drama, and he's just. I don't think it's going to work out. But
is that right? You don't think it's gonna? Matt doesn't think it's gonna work, Ryan. It's
I
not
don't
working.
think
It's not going to work. Matt, you heard it here first. Dog Toast Matt DeBerry, college football expert, does not think it's going to work for Hugh Freeze at Auburn. Go.
I just don't. Yeah. What do you think, Ryan? What's the most he can accomplish there? Really, what is his ceiling at Auburn?
I mean, a couple upsets. That's the ceiling. You know, it's beat. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's winning a game like this. That's the ceiling. I just don't think the leash is getting tighter already, and they're eventually just going to cut that rope. So it's the same thing as last time. It's the same thing as Florida. These guys are just in a job that they're not going to keep in a couple of years because they're not the right guy, and the infrastructure around is I don't know. It's just not working. I mean,
let me just say this. Let me say this real quick. Let me say
okay.
this. The problem is Auburn always has guys, and y'all. I know y'all can. It looks like y'all can see me. You can't. So I've been trying to kind of flag you down here on this. Auburn always has guys that can compete with Georgia and Alabama, particularly at home. They showed that last year when they had both of them on the ropes. They probably should have beat Alabama and let them slide, Matt or Ryan. But Auburn always has guys that are not scared of the Georgias of the world because they grew up playing them. So what is his ceiling? For me, it is, I mean, it's not going to work with Hugh Freeze, and that's fine. But whoever the next person is, it's never going to take long at Auburn to be pretty good. The question is, can they catch Georgia at this stage, Georgia and Alabama in the league? And Georgia, Alabama, and Texas, I don't know.
No, you were asking the program ceiling or the ceiling with Freeze?
I think they're not dissimilar now. I think that's the problem for Auburn. If we're having a longer discussion, which we're not, I just want to say this in 15 seconds, or at least try. Auburn has let things slip so far that I am now concerned that they can't get it back. However, Tennessee is a great example of you can come back. So, but they're a long way down the slide.
Yeah,
they've not won the league since 2013. I mean, that's 10 years. That's a long time.
That's true. There's also a lot of other programs that haven't either. I mean, most of that is Alabama, Georgia, and LSU. I think all of it is those three teams, actually. But I think I don't think that their ceiling with Hugh Freeze is probably the same as the program ceiling at this point in time. I think that the program ceiling in general is a little bit higher. I mean, Can you get to where you're really competitive every 3 years? I mean, I think that would be it's hard to get to that point already, but that's kind of what it was. I think they can get back to that. They're never going to be what Georgia and Alabama are right now, and what Texas is becoming. But yeah, that's over. That's over.
But now
I don't know. But from 1982 to 2004. Well, even longer than that, they really were. I would say until 2012 or whatever it was, 2014. It really fell off in the last 8 years, Matt. That's the problem for Auburn.
Yeah, and I think they're at a point now where they can hang a banner if they just make it to the playoffs, right? I mean, I don't know when the next time Auburn's going to be making the playoffs is. It might be a while, but that's something that they can at least look to and say, hey, that could be our goal this year. If we have a good team, if we make the playoff, that is something special. Whereas you have a lot of other programs who we're talking about may not miss the playoff for a while. So they've got a lot of climbing to do.
I do think they can make the playoff now. They're not just going to go away. Go ahead.
With Hugh, do you think
with Hugh Freeze? I'm not talking about Hugh Freeze anymore. Okay. In all seriousness, I don't know if Hugh Freeze will be there at the end of this year. And I'm not like poking or whatever. I mean, like, this is bad right now at Auburn. It's not Brian Harsin bad yet, but we're talking about Hugh Freeze here, and there's no telling when that could really get bad. So I'm talking about Auburn globally speaking. I think if you were to go out and get, 2013 Kirby Smart, and by 2016, 17, yeah, you'd be really fighting your way up the line. The question is, who is the best fit for Auburn? Because at Auburn, just like at Clemson, and just like at Texas A&M, certain places you got to have the right fit, and the fit really matters. Clemson, Auburn, I would say Clemson, Auburn, Texas A&M, and there's maybe some others out there. But those three specifically, you got to have the right person. And if you don't, that's it. It will not work. Ryan, final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be about getting the right guy. It's the same thing with Florida. It's going to be about getting the right guy. And a lot of these
It shouldn't
programs,
be at Florida
it's
though, man. You should be able to
no,
put anybody in there.
Well, yeah, maybe that's fair. Obviously Kirby and Georgia is an elite marriage. Other people could get it done at a Georgia. I think that at Auburn, there's not as many choices
Right.
that could get it done there. They got to find the right guy, and that's just easier said than done, obviously.
Clearly it is. Georgia, Auburn. Make sure you're watching us on Riding Home. We'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.